All right, my English teacher friends, I'm excited to present to you another one of my voice lessons. And this one's entitled, Who Got the Chops to Crank a Six? So lately I've been really fascinated with the idea of teaching voice, rhythm, and flow. How do you cultivate that wow factor in students that allows them to ascend the rubric in terms of that elusive, subtle, intangible voice point on the AP Lang and AP Literature rubrics. So, what can we do to help them cultivate the voice so that when they a reader is reading their work, we say, wow, holy goodness, this is phenomenal, this is fantastic. So this is an exercise that I've created to help my students practice um, their voice. And ultimately, it started from this. The other day, I was running and just had a random thought, as often I do when I am exercising or running or just with idle time. And I said, who in the American sitcom, American drama, the Hollywood characters, who would score a slam dunk six on all the essays, Lang and Lit? Who has the voice? All right, to crank a six every single time. And I made a post in the AP groups and on my own Facebook page, Teachers Making Better Writers. And it was a wild compilation of characters. And in the speech bubble here, I put down a few of my favorites. So, adult narrator Ralph from A Christmas Story, Rory Gilmore from Gilmore Girls, David from Schitt's Creek. That I'm not too familiar with Schitt's Creek, but a number of people mentioned David, Carrie Bradshaw, Niles Crane from and Frasier, and one of my favorites. My AP Dream Team would have to include Chris Stevens from Northern Exposure. He was the radio show host that did the morning show. So in this assignment, what we're going to do is have students make an AP Dream Team. They're going to be able to come up with their own list of characters who cop that voice, that blend of the colloquial, the vernacular, and the academic, the tier two, with such a suave presence that they get the pizzazz, they get the spunk, they get the flair point on the AP rubric. So students can come up with a whole wild list of possible characters. This is just, my AP Dream Team, like my top five, my top six. So ultimately, here's my contention that I just find in looking at anchor papers that the College Board puts out and that teachers share in the Facebook groups, that when we are blown away by a paper, it contains a voice that sounds like a Ralph or a Kevin Arnold, an adult version Kevin Arnold from the Wonder Years, or a Carrie Bradshaw, or a Niles Frasier, right? And it's this teeter-totter balance between the academic, which I call tier two level vocabulary. Basically, it has a good blend, a good mix of your average run-of-the-mill SAT level words with the colloquial and the vernacular. I really think that this can be taught. A number of teachers have said to me, Christian, you're absolutely nuts. It's like teaching, a modified bench warmer, the LeBron James intangibles. It can't be taught. Either you have a knack for it or you don't. It's like congenital. It's innate. You either have it or you don't. And I disagree with that. I think that we can uh, hardwire and tweak the internal machinations of our students to help them cultivate the voice to ascend the rubric. So, what I have done with my students is gather a whole bunch of what I guess we would call mentor examples. And this is one from Ralph from A Christmas Story, the adult narrator Ralph. So look at the manner in which this flows. Over the years, I got to be quite a connoisseur of soap. Though my personal preference was for Lux, I found that Palmolive had a nice piquant after dinner flavor, heavy, but with a touch of mellow smoothness. Like this is the type of writing when my students can execute this, I'm blown away. I'm like, yes, I've earned my paycheck. I'm happy. I have, there's a reason for my existence. But look at that blend of the colloquial, the vernacular, and the tier 2 academic. Words like piquant, connoisseur, blended with that vernacular and the colloquial, that casualness. That interplay and that inner exchange, I think, is really important to get the elusive voice point on rubrics, whether it be for AP or Gen Ed. I'm in New York State, so we have the Regents rubric. But ultimately, I want my students to have their own voices. We have to keep in mind they're 15, 16, 17 years old. And oftentimes they have this notion that the more $1 million words they use, the better their writing is. And we have to completely disabuse them of that notion. It's not, good writing is not an inundation of tier 2 level words. They have to stay in their wheelhouse, not sound contrived, not sound pretentious, but stay within their wheelhouse. And this is what adult version Ralphie does, right? That teeter-totter balance. So what do I do to help my students along the way? I've talked a lot, and there's many videos I have in my YouTube channel with regards to this. As a staple, like seminal text of my classroom, I use Write It Right with Strunk and White as a means to teach grammar, punctuation, syntax. Because if we go back for a second, look in terms of the syntax and the punctuation here. That's complex. One thing that students often do, even at the AP level, when I inherit them, is they often overuse the short, simple declarative sentence, but then they have a glut of comma splices. And I talked to a number of AP readers this year, and they're like, "Oh my goodness, it's comma splice heaven." When you read for the exam, students don't know how to punctuate, they don't know how to manipulate their syntax. And then grammar stuff, needs to be taught as well. So how do you build the foundational literacies? So I use Write It Right in my word study academies, in my nuance academies with my students to really shore up and ensure that they know how to punctuate, how to manipulate their syntax, and how to, do these things ultimately to yield a voice, rhythm, and flow like a Ralph. And in Strunk and White, they have something called rule number 18. And they assert that there's 12 different ways to write a single sentence. So you can see here, going back to this, that there's great variety with the sentence constructs, and there's not too many sentences here. But clearly, Ralph, adult version Ralph, knows how to wield something above and beyond the short, simple declarative sentence, something that our students often don't know how to do. Unless they come to us inherently possessing the voice that we're talking about here. So I have a whole bunch of mentor sentences, statements, exemplars, and models to demonstrate for my students how my dream team operates their voice. So this is adult version Kevin Arnold from the Wonder Years. Look at the sentence constructs, look at the syntax, look at how the vocabulary is balanced in here between the vernacular, the colloquial, and the tier 2 academic. Once upon a time, life was simple, evolutionarily speaking. Then things began to change. The competition got tougher. There were winners and losers. The struggle continued. Then in the fall of 1970, a new creature appeared, the likes of which had never been seen before. Noble, upright, virtuous, ninth grade man, master of all he surveyed, which in this case was Woody's Pizza Barn where the elite went to meet. Yep, by the last week of summer, I was feeling pretty good about myself. I mean, I love that. Just that blend of all three, the colloquial, the vernacular, the academic, the manipulation of the syntax. So I have whole discussions with my students about the purposes of those 12 sentences, all right, those 12 sentence constructs. So why Do authors use short, simple declarative sentences? Why do authors use parenthetical statements? What's the purpose of an adjective clause, right? What's the purpose of an infinitive clause? So I want to get into that level of nuance with my students and have them make intelligent choices as authors, right? So that's something that we do even with the ninth graders, Gen Ed ninth graders, in terms of talking about nuance and word study. And I have one more example here, and it's from Chris from Northern Exposure. He was the radio show host. So again, look at the voice, the rhythm, the flow, the sentence structure, the blend of the colloquial and the academic in this. There's a dark side to each and every human soul. We wish we were Obi-Wan Kenobi, and for the most part we are, but there's a little Darth Vader in all of us. Thing is, this ain't no either or proposition. Again, I love that blend. We're talking about dialects, the good and the bad merging into us. You can run, but you can't hide. My experience, face the darkness. Stare it down, own it. As Brother Nietzsche said, being human is a complicated gig. So give that old dark night of the soul a hug. Howl the eternal yes. Right? So he embraced his inner Walt Whitman. Chris Stevens did in Northern Exposure. But we could have a fantastic conversation about why those sentence constructs are wielded in the manner in which they are, the blend of the academic and the casual diction, and ultimately how do you transition or translate that into the FRQs on Lang and Lit. So that's ultimately where we're going. So here's the assignment I have created for students to practice cultivating this voice. So I know personally with my students, they are obsessed with headline news, like pop cultural headline news and videos, either Instagram or TikTok videos. So for this, they can choose any headline or video and narrated story from the voice of a Hollywood Dream Team member. So I've modeled this a few times for my students, and I'm going to choose a headline from this morning's news to model for my students. But I'll give you some other exemplars and models too, so that you can unpack this for your students. So any like school appropriate TikTok video, Instagram video, viral video, headline news story. And what they're going to do is narrate this story of the video, of the headline news clip from the voice or perspective of their Hollywood Dream Team member. And they can choose anybody. They can be Carrie Bradshaw. They can be, Walter White from Breaking Bad. Anybody they decide to go with. Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It does not matter. So any Hollywood character that has this swagger, this it factor in their voice. So ultimately, we're trying to balance the academic, the colloquial, and the vernacular. And then, as always, follow the exemplars. So here's what I did. All right, I got to Bob Ross my instruction, because if I just give that assignment, it's going to be a crapshoot. Students really need to have exemplars and models in order to make sense of such a complicated assignment. So as I always say, you got to Bob Ross your instructions. So I wrote a few exemplars, and for time's sake, I'll show you one, but I'll tell you of the others that I did for my students. So in this one, this morning I woke up and my daughter, who's going to be a senior and take AP Lit next year, shared with me that Machine Gun Kelly says he smashed a champagne glass on his forehead because he didn't have a fork to clink the glass. My daughter said, that sounds like something, 17-year-old Christian Coon would have done. She knows her dad very well. I was not very Machine Gun Kelly-esque in my days. She was making fun of me. But so that's headline news. Basically, I'm going to narrate this story from the voice of Chris Stevens from Northern Exposure. And for those of you that are familiar with Northern Exposure, you know that he had a morning radio broadcast show, and I'm basically going to cushion it, or like package everything in that radio broadcast. So other examples that I did, I took it from the perspective of Carrie Bradshaw from Sex and the City, that classic scene in Dirty Dancing, like the quintessential scene in Dirty Dancing where she gets lifted into the air. So basically what I did for my students was mute the sound of that, but show that video clip and have Carrie Bradshaw narrate that scene like that. It's literally like a 23-second scene from Dirty Dancing. Another one I did was Niles Frazier doing a TikTok video of this woman, young girl in her 20s, jumping from a roof onto a trampoline to bounce into a circular swimming pool. So the girl drops, hits the trampoline, and face dives into the swimming pool, and injures herself. And it's not funny. I don't think that's funny stuff, but it went viral. And basically have Niles narrate that video. So those are the types of things that students can do. And like I said, they're always watching video clips from Instagram and TikTok, and they're very, very, culturally aware of pop cultural headline news. So they can go in a million directions for this. So for the purposes of our video here today, I'm going to do this headline about Machine Gun Kelly and narrate it, the story with the voice of Chris Stevens from Northern Exposure. So here's what I would show my students if I'm Bob Rossing my instruction for them. So, good morning to the fine folks of Sicily, Alaska on this beautifully brisk, sun-smiling autumnal day. And to all of those who are in earshot of KBHR's static celestial void, a glorious, God-fearing morning to you as well. So you can see there, I'm really manipulating my syntax and being hyperbolic to a sense of demonstrating and flexing for my students that blend of the colloquial, the vernacular, and the academic, right? So I'm modeling, but man, right with some complexity, right? So I want to see more than just comma, period, right? So I'd like to commence the day with this first sip of triple shot. And Chris loudly downs his espresso drink in one gulp, and to give a hearty 3 cheers to Machine Gun Kelly for unraveling the mysteries that bind humanity to their puppet strings, right? So be hip, be cool, right? Be a 15, 16, 17-year-old self, not some Princeton professor wearing a tweed, jacket with leather elbow patches, smoking a Sherlock Holmes pipe. Sometimes I tell my students that they sound like a contrived Harry Potter character. Stay in the wheelhouse. So look at the syntax, look at the punctuation, look at the teeter-totter balance in this. You see, us humans forget the fact that we crawled our way through the primordial ooze to get to this very point in our lives. But truthfully, we're as barbaric today as we ever were. So I would highlight for my students, the syntax here. You see, comma, us humans forgot the fact that we crawled our way through the primordial ooze to get to this very point in our lives, hyphen, but truthfully, comma, right? Sentence complexity. That needs to be done in order to get the elusive voice point. Couple that with the tier 2 in here and the vernacular and that casual diction. You got the whole thing going. So I got more. Our DNA is hardwired to be as flawed and as slow as the original Commodore 64 trucking along on a dial-up connection of rush hour gridlock AOL. Cheers to you, Machine Gun Kelly, for the reminder that we're all just a bunch of lizard brains. Sure, we can parade around with our social grace and gentility, but who doesn't want to smash a champagne glass to the forehead when they can't find a fork? What it comes down to is this. This is what happens when one does not receive enough kitten licks as a child. This quintessentially harkens back to our old friends Oedipus and Electra, two stark reminders of the fate that gets sealed when there ain't enough mama love to go around. We circle back to the chicken and egg debate, nature versus nurture, which came first. All right, so you can see here teeter-totter balance, but complexity of sentence constructs, right? Don't overuse, don't over manipulate a single sentence construct. And then, especially for our AP Lang kids, you're going to get into, oftentimes we study the use of anaphora or parallel syntax or parallelism when orators or speakers or writers use it. But why do we as students use it, right? So why do we use hyphens? Why do we use parentheticals? Why do we parallel our syntax at times? To what effect? What's the point? What's the purpose of three successive short, simple declarative sentences, right? Author choice. Our students need to know this stuff in order to be intelligent writers. Even the most feral beast hungers for attention and the googly-eyed acknowledgement of their banal existence. This is why our local Sasquatch comes out of the deep recesses of the wilderness to say, "Hey, look at me. I need you to see me." And our dear friend Nessie in Loch Ness, we honor you as well. Cheers. We see you, Machine Gun Kelly. We see that you hunger for our attention and approval. You created a genuine Picasso on your forehead last night. Call it something closely akin to a classic Matisse in blood-red fingerprint scrawl. All eyes are on you, our friend. Bravo, a big standing O. You are the brilliance of the cosmic boomerang coming full circle to remind humanity of its purpose and cause. You are the higher calling resonating in the echo chamber. You are the golden reminder of why we are here in the first place. Cheers to you, Machine Gun Kelly. I'm stirring the sugar in my coffee with a fork. And again, I could have a whole conversation here with my students about why am I using anaphoras? Why am I using repeatedly three successive times this one sentence construct, right? So effect, purpose. I'm aiming for something here with my voice. So it's all teeter-tottering, all balancing out, colloquial, vernacular, academic, tier 2. And because I can, and because I'm 1,000 times more carnal than you, I now stick this fork in my eye and pronounce to the world that we all needed much more mother love than we ever dreamt possible. Love to all in this champagne supernova of a day. We'll be back in 2 with our local sporting news. All right, so that's just one example that I'll share with my students of how to manipulate that voice that we're going for. And the question is, will some of your students be able to do this? Yes, some. Will some struggle? Absolutely. Well, that's a good lesson plan, right? We don't want to give them easy, low bar assignments to do. This is on a hyperbolic level. It's voice on steroids. I'm really magnifying and amplifying how to do it. Students they don't need to do it at that level of kilter and decibel, but ultimately that's the pizzazz and the wow factor that I would like to see in their academic writing. And sure, we're doing a creative piece here, but transference is going to be key. So as many as you know, I'm running my summer short course series, and we will be doing the Nuance Academy on July 12th, I believe, at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So if you'd like to learn more tricks of the trade to cultivate this voice, this rhythm, this flow, how do you get students to master the basics of punctuation, syntax, and grammar? What do you do to cultivate that level of vocab and diction in your students? You need a word study academy. So how do you pour those words into your students' heads? How do you give them access to all of this stuff? So we'll be talking about that quite a bit in my summer short course series, and you can learn more about about that if you go to www.teachingwritingcoach.com. And you can also email me at teachingwritingcoach@gmail.com. If you would like these slides, by all means, you can email me and I'll send them to you so that you have the assignment. And then I got good news. So the Teach It Right 5-week mastermind, we're hustling that out to the National Writing Project. So I got hired as a lead teacher for the National Writing Project, and I'll be offering that Teach It Right 5-week mastermind through the National Writing Project going forward. So we're going to start that August 9th if all things go well. And you can get more information on my webpage from that. And also, I think many of you know that the wonderful Tim Freitas and Brandon Abden and I will be co-presenting at this fall's NCTE conference in Anaheim, California. So many irons in the fire. If you'd like more information, just give me a holler, and I'll be happy to share what I have and what I know. So for now, happy teaching and happy writing.